everybody. I am recording, okay. It's Maglev on Tuesday by now. It's just after midnight. December 21st, that would make it, 2021. And I'm on my way driving home after dropping off the kid. And another fine weekend. And let's see, things to talk about, things I'm thinking about, stuff I'm piecing together. And as I guess anyone who watched my last two videos knows, that this concept that these things are in the air that have technology that's beyond what we have today, fact, is what was either admitted by the government or put out as a ruse to throw the Chinese onto a billion-dollar wild goose chase after alien technology that doesn't exist. So, I firmly believe that following the atomic bomb, there was a lot of scientific advancement following on to that work, from the people of the quantum crew at the Copenhagen conference, plus Casimir, plus Feynman and Wheeler and all these others who really could put a lot of technology into TR1 phase, technological readiness 1, by just spewing out idea after idea of how you could use this stuff. And a lot of it leads to anti-gravity systems, either the anti-gravity of magnetic rails through the air, which is what you get when you magnetize the you polarize, you align in all the same direction the ambient quantum fluctuations that are always occurring, the rippling of space-time that results in particles kind of coming into existence and disappearing instantaneously on the Planck scale of time, so that they're almost not here at all. But collectively together, if you can rally enough force, you can get them to coincide or to all point in the same direction like a magnet. And then based on the field that you're generating to do this, you can manipulate it enough in order so that you can move the magnetic fields through the air, so that you can move a ship through the air that's sort of fastened to that location in space, and then you roll it along the rails right there through space. And so that doesn't bring gravity, the force of gravity, into the picture much, but then the other anti-gravity system, which really is anti-gravity, that I talked a little bit about on my last short video, takes another approach, which is to lower the inertial mass of an object through emitting local gravity wave fields. So I really haven't done the thought experiments surrounding how the TR3B flies. You spin some mercury in a donut and your mass, your inertial mass lowers, and then other things come into the picture to provide, directionality and thrust, I guess. But you can at least remove gravity where you are. You can lower your inertial mass. And then I presume, or I've been thinking all this time, that you can project a field of lower mass in any direction around you, so that you basically fall into that direction, and then you keep projecting that field a little further ahead, and you keep surging or falling into it. So those are the more traditionally saucer-shaped UFOs. Those would not be the Tic Tacs. I believe the Tic Tacs are magnetic rail devices, and the saucers, if they exist, and the TR3B, the rectangles and the saucers, use more of a gravity manipulation technique that comes from things which I still need to think through. Why the heck would that work? You know, this gets to all those, you know, alleged Nazi, you know, super weapon, you know, Bell UFO time travel experiments, Red Mercury, and all this weird, you know, conspiracy theory stuff. But there have been experiments with superconducting disks being spun in the 90s that allegedly lowered the local gravity by some measurable percentage reliably. And there's people working now to try and reproduce those experiments. There's even a video on the YouTube that I watched the other day. I'll see if I can dig up the link and put it in the description under this video, of someone who seems to be demonstrating it with a home build. So a little flying UFO, it has cables running to it for power or whatever, but allegedly it's creating it's not a drone, there's no propeller in there, it's creating, and you know, and I guess in that case it's lowering inertial mass sufficiently so that a very small field then makes it go upward. I don't know. See, I don't get how these other things that allegedly power the TR-3B through spinning mercury, achieves anti-gravity or any other effect that would do that. So I need to think that through. I need to do those thought experiments. And then, what else? I should probably update the kind of website, the GitHub website that I was making for these things. I've been collecting video. I figure, you know, now is the time. Everyone has cameras, like automated and security systems, the Ring doorbells, and of course the ones we carry around in our phones. And cameras are becoming like ubiquitous, like everywhere. So of course a lot of stuff is going to be recorded now, and it's going to show up first on the social medias, the YouTubes, the Instagrams, the TikToks. So I'm learning how to search each one of these for the terms, you know, UFO and UAP, and then to sort by most recent, you know, filter by upload time. Each system has its own way of doing it, so you can get the juiciest bits before they're deleted. So it's fun to do, fun to collect that stuff. And we'll know one way or the other over the next few years whether these things are of terrestrial design and origin, or whether they're copied from UFOs. Of course, I say it all, you know, derogatory, but, you know, I want to believe. You know, at times in my life, I admit I have believed, but I really give the odds now about 50-50 chance. And, you know, for anyone who hasn't seen it lately, Google up the Disney Alien Encounters documentary. It's about a 1-hour documentary. And it pops up here and there. I think IMDb might have it. And it was to promote a Disney ride, admittedly. It was Michael Eisner saying, hey, we need to revitalize things, and our movies recently have been flops, so let's do a thing at the theme park at Disney World that plays off of the public's, you know, interest and indeed even paranoia over UFOs. So they made a 1-hour special that aired in only 5 states and aired only once and then never showed again, which of course fuels all the conspiracy theorists going, you know, it was, you know, too much information. The government doesn't want Disney showing it. And then there's the other side of the conspiracy nuts who go, oh, well, that was part of government-sponsored planned disclosure. It teamed Disney up with George Lucas. And of course, they're going to get people used to all the various scenarios of how it could play out. And the ride at Disney World started out, Alien Encounters, as something very inspired by the movie Alien and Aliens, which is hostile aliens whose, existence is antithetical to our own. It's us or them. And it was too scary for audiences, so they rebranded it as a Lilo and Stitch attraction, with Stitch playing the role of the, slobbering, killer alien getting loose in the exhibit. So it's Stitch, so it's okay. And I was at that ride. Me and my daughter, we were on that ride years and years ago, before it was closed, I think, in one of our early visits to Disney World. No, before it was after it was rebranded as Lilo and Stitch. I remember that exhibit. And so it's very convincing. It's one of those things that planted a lot of those original paranoid theories in people's heads. However, I had been paranoid about this stuff from time to time in the past. I was given a stack of printouts, very ominous looking printouts labeled the Cooper Papers, and it described everything, the different alien races that are out there, why they don't interfere early on, how the deals were cut, what the agendas of the different races are. And, the majestic, I forget whether it's 12 or 13, but basically that team put together by Truman, because after the bombs were dropped, not long after that, Roosevelt, who, was the one who gave the green stamp on the go-ahead of the Manhattan Project, but wasn't there to see the culmination of it. And it was Truman who said, yeah, go ahead and do that, drop the bombs. And so this Disney documentary makes out puts forward the proposition that the aliens started visiting us then. Duh, of course, because those nuclear bomb blasts announced our presence. It's a way of saying, here we are, pre-warp drive civilization, pre-interstellar travel, but post-technology. We tapped the power of the atom, and come and watch the poo show that may ensue. So all the interested alien races zoom in, and it's not like the boom of the explosions reach too far out into space. It just reaches local stuff, but something in the local vicinity can pick it up. There's sensors, there's technology, high-tech stuff. So some sort of sensor or radioscope that's trained just so, the same way we see, planets in other solar systems. Other civilizations could see one of those planets give out a strange pulse, surge of energy, and it's like, oh, there's another one, there's life. So what we should be looking for is, in the search for planets, it's unusual radio emissions that come as a fleeting blip, and that's the announcement. And so that's the premise in this Disney documentary about why there were so many UFO visits after 1945. And it was really 1948 where Casimir came up with the proposition that if quantum mechanics was correct, and there were all these constant field fluctuations, they should be there even in the empty vacuum of space. And if they were there, then they were at frequencies. They have certain vibrations. And if that's true, filters should work on them. And if you can put a filter around a certain frequency, in other words, filtering out the longer frequencies and only letting the lower energy, shorter wavelength frequencies pop into existence from the quantum fluctuation fields, because of the spacing of two mirrored metal plates, there's actually a pressure. I guess that would be an inward pressure, because the lower energy filtered virtual particles can't push out with the same pressure as all the other unfiltered particles on the outside pushing in. So it creates a pushing plate together effect. Now, it was also proven, and this is where Federico Capaccio comes into the picture. Also a scientist, also I think a physicist, but also a practical applications industry sort of person. And he might even still be alive and around, teaching as like a professor at Harvard or Stanford or one of these schools. Professor of physics, applied physics, I think, because he came up with a proposition that if the Casimir effect is there doing that, it should be measurable. And indeed, he was part of one of the teams who proved that it was there, the predicted effects were occurring, and high evidence for all this, virtual particle, quantum fluctuation thing existing being actually true. Because it was a little spotty there for a while with people even believing it. But it's proving to be quite true. So this guy, Federico Capaccio, who also invented the cascading quantum laser that is like a tricorder. It's like the makings of a Star Trek tricorder, where you point it at things and you can tell the properties of stuff by vibrations and stuff. I don't know how to ask. He is leading up all kinds of efforts to take advantage of everything that might be possible by geometric constructions at that Casimir force size. There's also the van der Waals forces, which I believe it's the manipulation of the van der Waals forces. They're somewhat interchangeable, these pressures that you get by having micro constructs, geometries at the nano scale. Sometimes reflective surfaces like mirrors, so that energy photons are bounced back from where they came. So when things are bounced back from where they came, and you put another mirror on the other side and you bounce it back from where it came, and you move these mirrors closer and closer, the only things that can fit in between are very tiny things. And then suddenly there's inward pressure. Now, the same mechanism that moves that direction to achieve inward pressure can throw something else off balance nearby, alternating it to an outward pressure. So what we're getting at here is oscillation. The big question is whether the Casimir force through nano structures, their assembly, their orientation, can be made to just spontaneously oscillate. And if it's spontaneously oscillating, you can give it some directionality. In other words, a spin. So you might have to have a radial axis here to get things going around in a circle. And whenever you have things like that going around in a circle without stopping, it's almost impossible to not let superfluids enter the discussion, because this is apparently what they do well. So you would take a chamber, again a donut-shaped chamber, fill it with something that can be cooled to a superfluid relatively easily. Mercury is a common sci-fi choice. And then you created a very thin washer or gasket that you lower down to this surface such that it just about comes in contact with a super fluid surface, but not quite. Now, of course, orientation and, you know, the gravity well that it's in, all this stuff plays a tremendously important role. Perhaps machines like this are not possible inside a gravity well. So perhaps energy taps, 0-point energy taps, have to be in the complete vacuum of space, or the void of space, free of, out of the nearby influence of a gravity well. That's a possibility. However, premise being that merely through a sawtooth mirror kind of shape, you can get a perpetual motion machine. That disc will start spinning because the Casimir forces will first pull it, and so it will get pulled in, but because of the machining of the thing, it can't get pulled in without a little bit of shearing or radial force. That shearing or radial force is kept super liquid, you know, friction free, so that it doesn't steal energy, or it steals as little energy as it can, so it's not a wash. See, if friction causes as much energy being lost from heat as energy that can potentially be gained by this free little twist, then you're not going to be able to extract any energy. It's not going to be an energy tap. It's going to be a, you know, a fair exchange engine. Energy in, energy out. It achieves absolutely nothing. But it was really cool how it did that, isn't it? So, for it to be a real energy tap, the twist of, say, the attractive force has to switch to the repulsion of the other direction that Federico Capaccio has demonstrated can be achieved. And through this, what does that do? You've got radial energy, perhaps. You've got internal building, growing, internal angular momentum. It picks up speed on its own. And so then you could try and extract energy by putting it into a magnetic field or coils or whatever like that, and have it just an automatic free battery. But I haven't heard Federico Capaccio talk about that kind of extraction of energy this way. Turbines are what occur to me first when this possibility of perpetual spinning is mentioned. But all I can hear him talk about in his YouTube talks is Casimir light. And so I think he uses the term light because energy is light, light is energy. If he used the word energy, he would be labeled a 0-point energy kook. And I think he's just a little bit too accomplished and pedigreed to allow himself to be thrown into that category, which is a hair's width of UFO buff, right? However, he is exactly the kind of a super scientist working on super science. These videos are already like 7 years old where he talks about this stuff. I'm like, didn't I hear him talking about this stuff when I heard the speculation as to how anti-gravity could really exist? How could states develop such technology and keep it completely secret? How could we still be investing so many billions of dollars into old-fashioned aeronautical, aeronautics, aerospace stuff, when all this anti-gravity stuff is known to exist by the powers that be? Isn't that irresponsible spending? There's no limit to the amount of spending that will be, that could be flushed down the toilet, just even in the interest of covering such a secret, such a reality. So So the US government could, probably does know that various forms, various paths to anti-gravity exist. It's just a fact, right? This stuff was TR1 and TR2 back in the late 40s, certainly in the 50s. You know, different experiments by like that Russian scientist pop up in the 90s. You know, Lockheed Martin and Boeing and their precursor companies, because there's been a lot of roll-ups and mergers of who these companies are, have taken place under various names in the past, and they all have sort of danced around the fact that there's nothing about relativity and quantum mechanics that precludes the possibility of anti-gravity devices, and that sometimes it's only just it's going to take a lot of energy, which fusion will eventually fix at very least, and zero energy taps of the Casimir and van der Waals force at best, most optimistic, will also fix. When energy becomes nearly limitless, outlandish propulsion devices become possible. And they'd have exactly this leaky, flashing light electromagnetic signature that all these sightings are reported to have, because they all, one way or another, involve really, really powerful electromagnetic fields, of which the leakage takes all sorts of forms. It's got a thermal signature, it's hot. It's got a bright signature, it flashes and pulses. The flashing and pulsing is usually because to ramp the energy up that high, there's some sort of frequency resonating going on, so that you can add to the power of the resonating wave by hitting it on the exact right interval to build and build. So before these things are going to do some fancy maneuver, it's going to ramp up that energy with a flash pulse. And then some other mechanism kicks in and it zooms away, right? So most of the things we've been led to believe would be the signature of such vehicles by both speculative science and science fiction, we're seeing in at least two breeds, lineages, legacies, categories, classes, two classes of vehicles or devices. Let's call them devices, because vehicles implies there's things in them, beings in them. So there are two classes of devices, one which are elongated, cigar or tic-tac shaped, which seem to lend themselves to magnetic rail propulsion. Definitely, capable of, reaching the moon, the asteroids. It would be a great way to hop around the solar system for sure. Probably not great for interstellar space travel. The gravity wave stuff of the TR-3B is really not that much better for interstellar space travel. Again, certainly good for getting around the planet, good for getting to the moon, maybe good for, mining the asteroid belt. However, both these roads to anti-gravity is not faster than light travel, it is not interstellar space travel. For that, it's increasingly looking like we're going to need warp drives, just like Star Trek says. And how is that different than the gravity wave generators? The gravity wave generators of, quote, today with the TR-3Bs. I don't rightfully know. I gotta beef up on my on my sci-fi reading. right now, because during investigation into the Casimir force, the signature, the like negative energy or symmetrical signature, something that was expected to happen as a precursor to warp fields was observed at that nano level. So just like we have teleportation, just like teleportation is real, it can only be done with single atoms, and it's only kind of sort of teleportation because, you know, the particles are kind of identical on both sides, but who's to say it's exactly the same same atom? The information is teleported. So, non-locality, right? Somehow or other, the universe is not really like how it intuitively seems to us. At first pass, you can break it down into these quantum fluctuation wave fields. Everything is just a couple of supermassive, perhaps wrapping back on themselves, rippling fields. So it could be a sphere, and the whole surface of that sphere is rippling, and the details of that rippling all through the surface of the sphere is reality. And that sphere could be a black hole, and that rippling could be how Hawking radiation is given off, and all this speculation that the universe could just be the surface of a black hole. So, you know, nature of reality stuff, big questions. There seems to be something called free will. A lot of mostly particle physicists who believe in superdeterminism will tell you that as a result of complexity, chaos, turbulence, and all these other things, while what you are doing right now is, you know, inconceivably improbable, it is still calculable from initial conditions perfectly. That if the universe were played back with the exact same initial conditions, you would have the exact same outcome. Superdeterminism. And that solves certain problems of, say, the universe not really being what it appears because of non-locality, spooky action at a distance. But that would be solved because everything has already happened. Everything that ever will happen is, you know, determinable from the math, from initial conditions. So the fact that these 2 points in space that seem to have nothing connecting them together, yet are still entangled, is because they always have been and they always will be. Look at the math. You know, no extra dimensions are required. You know, no 3 dimensions is an illusion kind of thinking is required. But chances are 3 dimensions are an illusion. Chances are the odds are stacking in favor of the loop quantum gravity folks being right. I keep re-listening to The Universe Is Not What It Seems. I got to get this Italian scientist's name down. But he is basically leading the public charge the way all the superstring scientists of particle physics, this big rock stars like Michio Kaku and Neil deGrasse Tyson, who are all superstring physicists whose theories can ultimately never be proved, and multiple superstring proposals are all equally provable and disprovable, and it's great for books and touring circuits and being a public personality and holding yourself that much above everyone else because of the incomprehensibility of what you can understand and no one else can. So superstrings has a sort of mathematical eliteness to it. Loop quantum gravity, on the other hand, is saying hey, it's probably just this way. All the formulas are pointing to, infinities canceling out if you follow the following procedures, which uses Feynman diagrams for the quantization of units of space-time that exist on the Planck scale, and everything gets calibrated to the Planck scale, the speed of light, and the cosmological constant. That'll do it. And there you go. That's loop quantum gravity. It kind of is the theory of everything now because it holds together cohesively, and we're just looking for proof. We'll probably hear primordial black holes exploding. Oh, those sudden electromagnetic bursts. I forget what they're called, EMRs or something. I forget the exact initials, but it could be we already hear them, and we're just gotta prove that that's what we're hearing is actually them to a much higher probability. Then, we've proved loop quantum gravity, which is the worst misnomer for pixelized space-time. And, what we thought were atoms are actually huge conglomerations of yet smaller particles that at some point exist at the Planck scale, which is the theoretical smallest for any bit of matter. Because if you take matter and you keep compressing it smaller, as if in a black hole or as if the conditions at the Big Bang, you reach a point where any smaller, and the math shows us that it will become its own black hole. So that there's a minimum size that matter can't get any smaller than, because if it does, it collapses in under its own gravity well and is a single point black hole. And so that creates a theoretical lower limit for how small anything can be. But rather than a particle existing in space-time, it is a particle of space-time. Yeah, it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around, but it draws a picture a lot like that creepy alien video on YouTube, that captured one that has, it's just from some sci-fi visual effects dude, but is really convincing as a, human descendant who is traveling from, one alternate reality of Earth to another by traveling through the Mandelbrot representation of existence. So chances are we are the frothy foam, the bright matter, which is the interesting stuff in something like a Mandelbrot set. And the wonders of the multiverse that people are talking about are other arms and spirals of that Mandelbrot set. So there are infinite variations of your same pattern, the pattern that, we are one particular pattern within this Mandelbrot set of infinitely recursive patterns. And we're some of the interesting stuff. We're the bright stuff that's fun to continuously zoom in on and say, hey, what's going on there? It's reality TV. Look at that. There's some atomic bombs. They must have, cracked the atom mystery. Let's go watch them destroy themselves. So there's probably about a 50-50 chance that that's actually what happened. And we were kind of like the Disney World to the galaxy for a little while there, as all the tourists, poured in to see whether we were going to pull through that filter event or not. And now we're of considerably less interest, so all the UFO sightings have decreased because, it's not the poo show that, the ones hoping for that, we're hoping it would turn out to be. We're actually a much more responsible race than that. The optimists are right. So in any discussion between optimism and pessimism, when the pessimists try to drag you down, you can always come back with the argument, but the optimists are really right. They have won, they are winning, and you can only judge the state of winning and losing, of optimism versus pessimism by are we still here? Did we wipe ourselves out yet? No matter how bad you think it is, no matter what turtles are choking on, plastic, we have not wiped ourselves out. We have not crossed over that tipping point, Mr. Gore. There's always healing. There's always, recovery and planning bright roads forward. There are many sci-fi visions of the future that are not only not dystopian, but they are quite Garden of Eden nature, Garden of Eden-like in nature, where every human, which is allowed to reproduce as they wish, is afforded up to anywhere between 10 to 20 open acres to themselves. And humanity could go on like that with our 10 billion reaching, 100 billion on the surface of the planet without it being really any big deal, just better tech. And conservationism would be a thing. We would want to be good stewards of this planet we were left. And, we would, convert all the space that we're today using for farmland back into some sort of idealistic Garden of Eden scalable living condition. Rinse and repeat. 3D printers, free energy, hurrah. So a lot of this is coming down in our lifetime, fusion, power. I believe the only 30 years away now, right? It can only be 30 years away for so long. And that running joke hasn't been going on for that long. However, everyone who says, oh, all this anti-gravity tech is so beyond anything humans could ever make, I propose to them, isn't there something odd about fusion only being 30 years off? Isn't it very possible that with just a few well-timed red herrings, the people could be kept on these two fusion paths that are ridiculous? One is cold fusion, and the other is a sun in a bottle, right? Isn't like the worst way you want to achieve fusion to actually be to carry around a tiny little star? Doesn't that just seem stupid? Isn't it better to have some fuel injection system like our own gasoline-powered car engines use? Yes, it does. You don't have to fuse everything right away in order to get the crossover of energy, getting more energy out than the energy in, which is the magic thing we're trying to get to with fusion. I think we're at about 70%, and the Chinese and a couple other places have announced, efficient fusion. But what they're really announcing is zeroing in on the crossover. The crossover hasn't really even occurred, not in, publicly known, disclosed experiments. But who knows what has gone on in secret? Humans could never have developed that. Humans could never keep it a secret for decades. This stuff was seen 50 years ago. Yeah, well, it could have been TR7, technologically ready 7, 50 years ago. 50 years ago, totally feasible having TR7 rubber hits the road anti-gravity devices in the sky. It could completely be of terrestrial invention, design, and as big as the technological accomplishment is the feat of keeping it a secret for so long. So the too easy-ish looking paths to anti-gravity are likely of terrestrial design because they are not interstellar travel technologies in nature. They're just not. They're not gonna, not at the human lifespan scale. Sure, you can do Noah's Ark stuff and take it all with you and have semi-closed ecosystems, cities in space, Battlestar Galactica style. And we probably should do that. It's probably not a bad idea. It's one of the many decent paths to getting ourselves the heck off the planet, just because it's the right thing to do, to diversify, the branches of humanity, if we value what humanity is. And it should be valued because optimists are right. We tend, no matter the warfare, and no matter the genocides, no matter the cleansing of the gene lines that humans seem to do as a people, we're still here. There's still a fair amount of diversity. Intelligence eventually takes over for our passions, and the ability to enter mutually assured destruction Nash equilibrium games is earned. Yes, we developed atomics. Yes, we couldn't resist using it once. Oh, make that twice. Oh, make that three times. Oh, it depends on whether you count testing. So, how many times were nuclear and hydrogen bombs exploded, right? So, can't resist doing it, but it was only used as a weapon twice. Filter event survived, lesson learned. It serves as an antibody. It serves as a, inoculation. The body remembers what it was to have such an infection as a nuclear wasteland. Then it happened again with accidents like Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island. So these serve as humble reminders that fission ain't kosher. You don't want to split the atom to get your power. You might use it as an emergency thing here and there to have a special little battery to get stuff kick-started, because it's easier to carry around, radioactive heavy elements in deep concentrations than it is gases that are going to have to be, shot out as a gas, regasified from some source. I was saying element 113 in a prior video. Of course, I checked my pseudo facts and see it's element 115. I'm talking about 115. It's Leviosa. So, perhaps it's liquid hydrogen, or perhaps it's element 115. But one way or another, there's a source of hydrogen for fusion to become helium. That helium has to be gotten out of wherever that is. New hydrogen needs to be sent in. The energy needs to be extracted. And if all that goes well, you get a lot more energy out as you get putting in. It's the, controlled, it's the, turning. If you can picture a gasoline explosion, and you go, oh, that gasoline isn't worth anything. It's so combustible. It's so dangerous. Well, gasoline turned out to be worth something because of combustion engines. The Hindenburg explodes, and you go, oh, that hydrogen, that is such dangerous stuff. It's so combustible. It's not worth anything. Well, it was our path to anti-gravity then through buoyancy, and it's our path to anti-gravity today through being an energy force before we have the geometries of, 0-point energy taps down, if we ever do. It's much more likely for efficient fusion to come into place, especially in our lifetimes, than it is 0-point energy taps. Although to do zero-point energy taps, theoretically, it's just a matter of precision machining of parts and aligning them perfectly. And it might be that the whole thing is too fragile to exist, that any movement of this thing will throw the parts out of alignment and, you know, plates go crashing into each other with images of a collapsing space elevator in Dune. Calibration, balance, delicate balances. Newton's, laws of motion, conservation of motion, the third law of motion, I think it is, precludes most of these, even Casimir effect-based zero-point energy taps, from being possible. It's quite possible that it's another bootstrap situation, that you can't lift yourself by your own bootstraps, that you can't get out more energy than you put in, that even the intelligent guidance of something, Maxwell's demon such as it were, to get order from chaos, to add entropy, to reduce entropy at no cost. Well, Maxwell's demon zipping around, knowing when to open the trap door and to let the, molecule of one thing to go to the other side of the chamber, so that the cream could unmix itself from the coffee, for example, is false. It's a false presumption, because for Maxwell's demon to be able to do that, it needs its own energy source, and it is doing work in order to open and close that trap door between chambers. So there are various, ways to prove that conservation of internal momentum, kills energy taps, zero-point energy taps, dead in their tracks. Others would say that you can make things oscillate in nature. You can put a water well on a river, and that water well, the water wheel for the well, the water wheel, you can put a water wheel on a river, and that water wheel will spin. As the water fills the buckets, it turns it, and then the buckets spill out near the top, and the wheel keeps spinning. You could probably do it with just paddles. You don't even necessarily need the water buckets. It's commonly done in mills because the water gets used going down things and powering more things in turn. But you could do it with just paddles and extract energy out of the river. So the thought goes is such motion exists around us all the time, if only there were a way to extract it. And the question of whether that energy is extractable is mostly that of whether an oscillator can be built at the nanoscale to reverse the attractive and repulsive forces of the van der Waals forces of the Casimir effect, I think is the proper terminology. So I have no idea about the math of all of this. I barely even could talk about the nanogeometries of the sawtooth mirrors involved, but I just have this notion that it's kind of like a Fresnel lens. So if you've ever seen something being lit on fire with a concave mirror, it's because of the concentrating of the light waves balancing off of it. But this can be done also with a zigzag pattern of translucent materials or transparent materials, and that's a Fresnel lens. And that has a focusing effect. It focuses energy, it redirects energy, much the way its larger cousin, the concave mirror, does. So it seems that a surface much like a Fresnel lens, maybe with a radial pattern, could be lowered down to a super fluid surface, and it would just start spinning. That thing that you lowered down, which previously wasn't spinning, it has a center axle, will just start spinning. The superfluid, the cooled down, so it takes energy to cool things down. So there's a few gotchas in here and some real questions about when the energy crossover of getting more energy back actually happens. But you cool, say you have a superfluid and you lower a disk down on top of it to the point where that the Casimir effect starts to take place between the atoms of the superfluid and the radial plate being lowered down. On certain portions of that plate, there's an attractive force. On certain portions of that plate, there's a repulsive force. And the moment they yield to the directions they try and go, which will be a radial direction due to the shape of the disk, the attractive will become repulsive and the repulsive will become attractive, and you've got sudden spinning. Now, the same way these superconductors, especially today's like yttrium ceramic superconductors, are the alternation between the rare earth mineral, yttrium, and other materials, such that there's these sandwich layers, and these sandwich layers through which electrons can flow once things drop beneath a certain temperature is the key to superconductivity. It's got a flaky layered effect to it. Things aren't just magically superconductive like a piece of silly putty. They're much more like fiber optics, or things that have a granular and ingrained directionality to it. Hence the yttrium of the yttrium ceramic, hence the ceramic of these superconductors. And so, in that same spirit of those layers, perhaps these disks can actually be submerged as layered disks. Like if you've ever seen multi-layered hard drives, there's multiple disks layered up. There's a lot of other technology that does that, a stack of disks. So perhaps you can have this stack of disks suspended right in the superfluid. So why lower things down and have this, how far do I go, have this whole calibration thing? Why not have, nano milled and machined stacked disks get submerged into a superfluid that exhibits the Casimir effect between the disks and the superfluid, so that all the disks, which are attached maybe to a center rod, start spinning, and so that rod is just magically spinning. What you have is a forever spinning. You have the magic turbine, right? So if these things ever became commonplace and could work in the Earth's gravity well, what you would have is just something very cylinder-like, where one end of it was spinning at probably fabulous speeds and probably enclosed in something that's extracting electric energy through it, through mere induction. And like, depending on how much heat side effect you want, you could ramp up or down the energy that you could recover from the spinning force. If you want a lot of amperage, if you want something really powerful to drive large machinery, chances are you have to increase the, quote, resistance, such as it is, between the Casimir spinning plates and the superfluids, and the whole thing would gain a lot more torque, but it would probably heat up. There would be heat byproduct. But you could drive more powerful equipment. But through a series of gears and pulleys, you could probably ramp the speeds up and down to whatever you need. It would be a pleasure to watch this thing, say, drive a forever clock, so that that fabulous speed of the spinning was translated down to almost the, not almost, the completely imperceptible movement of the last gear and the smallest digit on the, millennial type clocks that use gear ratios to, ramp to scale 10,000 hours out. So, you want to power a millennial clock, you take one of these Casimir batteries, you throw it in there, you build the whole thing out of something that resists breaking down like crystal. So you have a crystal Casimir millennial clock. These are stupid, infinite energy tricks that are going to, maybe be possible in our lifetimes. Knock on wood that tapping into 0-point energy is real. But even if not, we've got a very bright future, and that brightness is the fusion energy. There's still going to be some fission energy here and there because everything needs a starter, right? There's nothing like pulling a ripcord and having some free power come out through some easy tech, right? So, yeah. Does that wrap it up? That wraps it up. I'm getting close to home. I should be wrapping it up. Think. Yeah. So this discussion segues nicely into, warp fields and if there really are alien visitors, they're not using either of those two technologies, the aforementioned discussed technologies. The TR-3B is inappropriate for actual interstellar travel. Moon base and back, no problem. Tic Tacs, moon base and back, no problem. Local vicinity of our own solar system, pretty traversable. Long waits, especially radio delays. We need ourselves the quantum radio is what we need. We need the Ansibles. So remote telemetry can be done instantaneously. So our Tic Tacs and TR-3B drones can be steered instantaneously without even necessarily, autonomy. You don't need the robots to steer them. If you could steer them instantaneously as a human from back on Earth through some, spooky action at a distance Ansible radio device. But that's a whole nother video in the future. Okay, so I think I covered that pretty well. This is about the 3 propulsion systems at play that may exist. We certainly have one of the 3 if people aren't lying through their teeth, right? If these people's names always elude me, but the USS Nimitz, Navy pilots, several of them, the operations people, the people on the equipment, the targeting equipment, and the pilots themselves. It's 2 people per plane over 4 planes or whatever. So that's 8 people. It was 3 planes over 6 people. So 6 people all out lying about these Tic Tac devices under orders of the government, right? It's a reasonable possibility. Hey, you'll get to travel and talk with this, Harv Laser guy or whatever his name is. And you'll be on the UFO circuit. You'll be set for life. You'll be that UFO guy. And we'll protect, you from ridicule. We'll back you up on it. You'll always be hireable. We'll be like, yep, we recorded it too. And, it'll be a great big joke. Make everyone believe these things exist. Control the story. Control the story. And all it takes is a few credible tic-tac-toe device sightings, which point to the least miraculous form of anti-gravity, in fact, not anti-gravity at all, that by all rights should exist and doesn't even rely on unobserved effects and phenomenons. It only relies on fusion energy, ramping up enough energy to magnetize the quantum field. Being able to actually magnetize the quantum field, question mark. I believe it's been proven but to be usable at the human scale would require too much energy enter fusion, right? So that's, I believe, the point at it's at. There's also some complex details in there about movement and steering the thing, but I think that would dovetail with all the stuff we've done for maglev trains already. We know about, projecting, alternating waveforms and making them travel, projecting waveforms travel so that the thing fixed in relation to those fields travel as well. We know how to drag maglev trains on a rail. So I presume that with computers, the directionality of these, quantum locking magnetic highway propulsion devices is pretty non-miraculous. It's firmly under the "where's my flying car" category. Even all the various drone-like technologies, electric flying cars, that really are coming into place. There's a lot of wonderful ones out there. Nothing is going to beat not being able to fall, just so long as you have power. And just not being able to fall, right? You're fixed in space. They could design a little spiraling road down. They could just lower you slowly as if on an elevator. It's just as if you grabbed something that was hovering there in space and it had the same resistance to movement as those quantum locked, superconducting disks that are all over the internet have. Electromagnetic forces are stronger than gravity in local distances. Vastly stronger than gravity, vastly able to overcome gravity. Electromagnetic force can lift stuff. We see it all the time. That's not anti-gravity. That's just, doing something with more force than gravity that happens to be going against the, force of gravity, but it's not anti-gravity. These gravity wave projectors, whose, principles I don't understand the way I understand quantum phase lock. I don't understand quantum phase locking either. It's just so easy to see demonstrated working, quite frankly. But these other anti-gravity, proposed propulsion devices that are based on, spinning, mercury, and I haven't seen it demonstrated. I've seen spinning things fly. I've seen the Levitron fly, but again, has the, two permanent magnets in the picture. One of the permanent magnets is just, it's same poles facing each other, but the stability is gained through the gyroscopic spin of the top. That's the Levitron toy. You should look it up. I've even got some videos of my wonderful beloved deceased Sammy cat hanging out with me playing with this Levitron toy. Highly recommended. Levitation isn't the problem. It's levitation on both ends. It's overcoming the internal, momentum problem. That's why gyroscopes, even though they feel like they should be able to fly, can't really fly. Gyroscopes on their own can't fly. Now, if you add an inertial reduction device of the type that Salvador Piaz, seems to have patented, which seems to involve counter-rotating. So in his scenario, it's not just one spinning chamber, but it's two spinning chambers that spin in opposite directions. And in some way, that adds stability, that adds the gyro rotating stability. Perhaps one cancels the others out, the way quadcopter drones work, right? And it achieves some stability. I'm not exactly sure how that's purported to work, but I will be giving it some thought. I'll be looking at the one YouTube video that's out there that purports to be showing it at a scale model. Pretty amazing video, honestly. If real, it could be a hoax. And yeah, that's about it. Following the real interesting stuff, the positive news stories. Can you imagine how interesting the world actually really is in real life? You know, society does this sort of dulling it down function. The daily grind wears us away, making us think that the world is significantly less miraculous and wonderful and dynamic, moving forward, always evolving, always changing. The daily grind makes us think that's happening less than it actually is. I remember black and white televisions. They were not the norm when I was a kid, but we only had one color television in the house at the time, and the other one, which ended up down the basement, was the black and white television, and we watched it. And the remote control was this loud clicky thing that had this, you know, button that made a click hammer on an internal bar whose vibrations were picked up by some audio sensor in the TV, and that changed the channels. And you could hear it choo through the channel. So you click here with a highly mechanical device, and then you hear it going over there through a highly mechanical process with solenoids and stuff on the remote control TV. And that's how remote control was achieved. The UHF change channel button hammered at a slightly different frequency than the VHF. The UHF and VHF, and the power had a different one. I think there were 3 buttons. One for on off, one for cycle UHF channels, one for cycle VHF channels. And that was the remote control of old that I remember. And look how far we've come with me being able to shoot, you know, an hour and 10-minute video like this on my phone, on the dashboard of my car as I drive. We are in the age of miracles. Just, you know, there is a sort of magic. You know, people who poo-poo the whole magic concept, well, our knowledge really does run up to limits. It really does reach these fairly mystifying quantum points ruled by probability clouds, and these other directions where, you know, you have to question how far does it go? Is it infinite? And you know, these are questions that we have really no answers to. We have theories, and it's oftentimes difficult to imagine this stuff, but there's not always the answers. So it appears that loop quantum gravity is bringing another round of answers. The grand unified theory, the theory of everything, is just around the corner, but it will still probably fail to incorporate thermodynamics and heat energy and heat loss and information loss through dissipation. Although maybe it will, maybe it'll incorporate information theory into it and resolve all that stuff, and the directionality of time. So we'll see. We'll see. These are all in our lifetime things for sure now, which will only reveal the next round of mysteries that our children and grandchildren will be scratching their head over as we, you know, knock out and, you know, nullify the next potential filter event and the next potential extinction event after the next, because humans can do that. We'll prove our place in the, you know, galactic neighborhood, and whether we're alone or not, we'll start filling out a little bit more space, you know, calling this galaxy our own, or this corner of the galaxy ours, whichever way it turns out. Thanks for joining me. Hope to talk to you again soon, and don't forget to subscribe.